The circle of fifths explained. Level 3 is modes. A mode is a subset of a scale. This definition isn't without its flaws, but it is a useful starting point if you've never been introduced to modes before. Taking C major as an example, we have the notes C, D, E, F, G, A and B. This is the first mode of C major and is named C Ionian. If we now play from the second scale degree of C major, we get D, E, F, G, A, B and C. It's important to understand the formula of this scale. It uses all of the notes of C major, but we start on D and end on D. We now consider its tonality as beginning on D. Therefore, all of the scale degrees are counted from that D note. D being 1, E being 2, and so on throughout the scale. We end up with the formula 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, where the notes are compared to what the major tonality of the same starting point would be. So we get a flat 3 here because in D major, F would be sharp, but instead we have a natural F, a semitone below its major counterpoint. This is the second mode of C major because it begins on C major's second scale degree and is named D Dorian. Continuing this process for all of the other scale degrees in C major, we can get the following table. The third mode of a major scale is Phrygian. In the context of C, we have E Phrygian. The fourth mode of the major scale is Lydian. The fifth mode is Mixolydian. The sixth mode is Aeolian. And the seventh mode is Locrian. When the modes of one particular key signature, in this case C, are played back to back, they all just end up sounding like expressions of C major. For instance, at the end of me playing the Locrian mode, your ear may have wanted to hear C again as a resolution. Very shortly, I'm going to cover why it pays to think of the modes as standalone scales in their own right. This is particularly helpful for composers, songwriters, and improvisers of music, who can really employ all of the different colours that the modes can offer. Now for the cool bit. When we map the modes around the circle of fifths for any major key, in this case C, we'll follow from left to right or west to east, from F all the way around to B, and what we get is a reordering of the modes, not from the first scale degree to the seventh, but rather the order Lydian, Ionian, Mixolydian, Dorian, Aeolian, Phrygian and Locrian. On the surface of it, this may not look like an important bit of information, but this order of the modes happens to go from the brightest sounding mode to the darkest sounding mode in a perfectly neat and step-by-step gradient. Feel free to screenshot the images you see as I go, but if you'd like to own a copy of the keynote and PowerPoint presentations on which I made this video, you can access that from my Patreon link below. At the beginning of the video, I said that a definition of a mode as a subset of a scale was a flawed one. In fact, for me personally, it was this definition that hampered my understanding of the modes for a very long time. It wasn't until I understood that each of the modes needs to be considered a scale in its own right, with its own sense of tonality. A good example of this would be to change between the chords D minor and G. One analysis could be that we're going between chord 2 and chord 5 of a C major key. But if those two chords just continue to loop, it becomes quite clear that the home note of this key is D. In D Dorian, the 1 chord is minor and the 4 chord is major. This is one of the most popular progressions to establish a Dorian sound. Returning to the circle of fifths, I'm now going to show you how the bright to dark modes are represented, but from the standpoint of one tonality. Step 1. Taking the letters around the circle of fifths to mean key signatures, highlight all of the key signatures that have the note C natural. Now we're going to map each of the C modes around the circle of fifths, starting on G. In G major, you've got the notes G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp and G. If we take that same scale and we start on C, what we have is C Lydian, or the fourth mode of G major. Have your screenshot fingers at the ready, because I'm now going to cycle through, from right to left, the modes that you get. C Lydian, C Ionian, C Mixolydian, C Dorian, C Aeolian, C Phrygian, and C Locrian. And you may have noticed that's the same bright to dark order that we established previously, Lydian being the brightest, Locrian being the darkest. So the video was supposed to end here, but that last point about brightness and darkness around the circle of fifths got me curious about the other 7-note scales, namely harmonic minor, melodic minor, harmonic major, and double harmonic major. The next few things I say are merely hypothesis or me sharing some questions and curiosities I have myself about this. But if nothing else, you will have a list of all of the modes for the scales that are on screen now. I've also included the MIDI files of these scales and their modes in the Patreon link below. So here goes. When we map C harmonic minor around the circle of fifths, this is what we get. And these are the modes of C harmonic minor. I'm going to zoom in and scroll down slowly so you can see them in your own time. If I now do the same thing that we did with the major scale, that is, to reorder those modes from west to east around the circle of fifths, here's what we get. We start on A flat and work our way around E flat, F, C, G, D and B. So now the main problem with this order of the modes is that the perfectly neat gradient from bright to dark in the major scale that we saw doesn't seem to be as defined here. The modes certainly do go from an expanded, more sharps at the bright end and are full of flats at the darker end, almost collapsing in on top of the tonic. However, this doesn't necessarily mean dark and bright. One reason for this could be that the harmonic minor scale is not built on perfect fifths like the major scale is. 12tone, as in 12tone videos on YouTube, responded to me on Twitter to say this very point. And also on Twitter, Ethan Hine, who writes really amazing blog posts about music theory, and in particular blues tonality, responded with this, which got me thinking that the modes and their darkness and brightness has got a lot to do with the subjectivity and the person's own context and culture. With that said, I did persevere and did the exact same thing for melodic minor, harmonic major and double harmonic major. And here are the results. Melodic minor looks like this around the circle of fifths. And here are its modes. Reordering the modes to go from west to east around the circle, we have E flat, F, C, G, D, A and B. And that gives us these modes. C harmonic major looks like this around the circle of fifths. When we reorder the modes, not numerically but from west to east, we get this. And lastly, C double harmonic major. And from west to east, we go D flat, A flat, F, C, G, E, B. And we reorder the modes to get this. So that's it for today's video. If you're still with me, thanks for watching right to the end. Join me next time in level 4 when I go down another rabbit hole and talk about negative harmony and how it relates to the circle of fifths. Until then, thank you so much for watching. Please consider hitting subscribe if you found something useful in this. This has been David Kennedy and I'll see you in the next one.